Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion with the NYDA Chairman, Yershen Pillay. Yershen, we've gone through the problems, we've gone through the challenges. You are in charge as chair of recalibrating the NYDA, recalibrating the message, obviously off a very low base of trust from the public and, of course, the young people in general. Take us through the kind of key elements of your turnaround strategy, particularly also as they relate to practical assistance to young people.
Well, in the last few months since taking office, we've changed the vision of the NYDA. We've changed the strategy to focus on 5 areas. And part of the strategic change has been to have a new focus on education and skills development. Largely because we know, for example, that the state as a whole spends more on education than any other area. But more so, our research indicated to us that more young people actually derive their incomes from salaries and remittances as opposed to business-related activities.
Okay.
So we've got to respond to that kind of demand that is out there. So the key focus will be on education and skills, complemented by interventions at economic participation, health and well-being, policy and research, and governance and administration. In those 5 areas, we plan to have a number of flagship programs with targets. And that's where we're saying that we don't want to create false expectations. We would rather have young people complaining about how the NYDA programs are working and we want more money from the NYDA. So there are a number of flagship programs.
Talk to me about the kind of role that the private sector can play. I mean, the NYDA is a state-driven initiative. If we're talking skills, I recently had a conversation with the Secretary General of the African National Congress, particularly around skills, and he was arguing that business have not come to the party in sufficiently large enough numbers to give young people the experience of the world of work. Many people come fresh out of university or institutions of learning with no practical experience and with very little space to do apprenticeships. What kind of initiatives are the NYDA involved in to try and upscale things like apprenticeships, for example?
Certainly, I mean, we've acknowledged that you can't expect the NYDA alone to provide opportunities for all young people. It has to be a collective effort. So if you don't get the civil society and importantly the private sector on board, we'll never achieve much in going forward. So there has to be a concerted effort by the private sector, especially to create the opportunities. Because on the one hand, we can be improving education and skills, making young people employable. But if there's no opportunities, then those young people remain on the streets. So the private sector has really got to come to the party here, create those opportunities, and not simply to be, I visited one of our sites where you had, instead of having skills transfer, young people pushing wheelbarrows. Now there's no skills development or transfer there. As opposed to training a young person to be a scaffolding inspector or a first aid inspector or something of that nature. So we want to see meaningful skills development and transfer taking place in the workplace. And we really want the private sector to create more of those opportunities because, again, I can tell you, Karina, you say what you want to say and subsidize any employer with whatever you want to. No employer is going to hire a young person who does not have the requisite skills or qualifications. And in order to have that experience, the private sector has got to open their doors.
Okay. Now, the whole question of the private sector opening their doors, I've spoken to lots of young people who've done apprenticeships. Many of them say that the culture in the private sector is averse to skills transfer, that what you have is young people come in, they end up making coffee, they are gophers, they go fetch people's laundry. They don't really get to, work in the areas where they were trained for and get that hands-on experience. Does the NYDA have a way of measuring the kind of skills transfer that actually happen? Is there a way in which to hold everyone to account and see, okay, for the 6 months that the person has been in this position, skills transfers in fact taken place?
What we plan to do is to make use of our lobbying and advocacy functions, meet with professional bodies, the Chartered Accounting Association, for example, and say to them, look, we don't want young women to be tea ladies. We want them to be trained as professional accountants. And so what is that body, what are you doing as a body to ensure that and have those discussions?
So have buy-in from the sectors.
Exactly, because that's where we can actually have some kind of meaningful change in the workplace itself. And so we want to have those kind of interactions with the various professional bodies bodies as part of lobbying them and advocating for the kind of skills development policy.
Now, I mean, we've spoken about skills training, we've spoken about this move away from assuming that every young person wants to run his or her own business, but we do also have the challenge of fostering entrepreneurship, of growing hubs where people can think out of the box. We need to come up with the South African Tata. We need to come up with fresh ideas. How does the NYDA contribute, Yershen, to the growth of young industrialists, the growth of young entrepreneurs, where people literally, think out of the box, and where you don't have this idea that someone is going to be employed by somebody else, and people can actually create their own employment, create their own wealth, and through that, generate more jobs and generate opportunities for other people?
We've said that we can only provide support. I'm sure many successful entrepreneurs would agree that entrepreneurship is not easy. If you're going to
it's one of the toughest things to do.
Indeed. So we don't want to hold a young person's hand from stage one to the end, because that's not going to contribute to a successful young entrepreneur. What we want to do is provide support and encourage a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur that, look, it's not easy, but persist, endure. Make sure that you learn lessons from your mistakes, and you become a successful entrepreneur as a result of experience, through your own experience, and not the NYDA holding your hand and babysitting you till the end. So we'll provide the support, whatever minimal support we can. And that could be access to finance, that could be business development support for your business plans, that could be mentorship. But at the end of the day, we want to place it firmly in the space, in the public domain, that your success is dependent on yourself. It's either you do it for yourself, and with the NYDA support, because it's quite shocking, Karina, that you only have 15% of young people in the country who have intentions of starting a business, and the region's average, according to the GEMS 2012 report, is 50%.
Wow!
So we need more young people to actually have intentions of starting a business, and then encourage them that this is not easy, but your success is dependent on you leading and the NYDA supporting.
I'm very keen to look at how you're going to use your position to lobby institutions of state to open and access opportunities for young people. Recently, I spoke with people in Zimbabwe, and one of the interesting things that people came up with there is one of the reasons why even the chaotic land reform program there has had minimal success is because of the prevalence of agriculture as a exam subject as part of the curriculum of the Zimbabwean education system, for example. How, if in the South African context, is the NYDA, for example, using the position of lobbying and advocacy to look at what kind of education opportunities be provided? I mean, if you look at your agricultural schools in South Africa, very underdeveloped, historically driven towards particular sectors in our community. How do we get agriculture, for example, mainstreamed as a school subject, as an exam subject, so that farming becomes an option, a real option for people from both a commercial, and an educational, perspective? You're
quite correct. In fact, what we've realized, I've had a number of interactions on the ground with young people, and they keep saying the same thing, that if we were taught about what a cooperative is when we were in primary school, we'd probably know more about it today. If we're taught about business when we were at that level, that early stage, we'd probably know more about it today. So we've got to look at issues of curriculum development and transformation on the one hand, and on the other hand, encourage young people to be more innovative, think outside of the box, look at new industries, the agro-processing. What are the opportunities? Which is a big part of what is in the National Development Plan, isn't it? Very much, very much. And you've got to have young people leading that. You can't say to, if the majority of the population is youth, it means these new unexplored areas of the economy, aquaculture. The Minister of Trade and Industry has been saying that we only contribute 1% to Africa, and Africa contributes 1% to global fish farming. And this is a new industry, and youth are not playing a part in leading the developments in this new industry. So we've got to really look at, the agriculture, agro-processing, aquaculture, all these new industries as part of the reindustrialization that is taking place. Talking about reindustrialization, Yesh, as a final question, there's also been a remarkable shift to concentrate on trading with other African countries on the continent, increasing intra-Africa trade.
Africa is a young continent. Young people are the most critical variable. What is the kind of relationship that the NYDA have with bodies similar to itself on the rest of the continent? Are you talking to other Africans about what can be done in terms of youth development and where certain synergies can actually be built?
We are. In fact, we're going to, quite soon, we're going to have a program with Namibia on a youth service exchange. And where we're going to learn from each other about youth service, encouraging the models that are currently being used in Namibia and the models that we are using. The Namibians spend 400 million rand alone on their youth service program. That's our entire budget as the NYDA for more than just youth service.
And what exactly comprises this youth service?
Well, it's part of just encouraging a culture of volunteerism. It's young people, where they be participating.
Shall I have youth brigades going in,
Indeed,
repairing schools, painting hospitals,
that's
that kind of thing?
That's it. So we want to do more in that field as well, and we want to work, not only locally but regionally to say, look, what can we do together with our Namibian counterparts? The Kenyans have done really well with cooperatives development.
Okay.
So as we encourage more young people to get involved in cooperatives, what can we partner and learn and collaborate with our Kenyan counterparts on the space of cooperatives, especially youth cooperatives in particular?
If we talk about this recalibration of the NYDA and making it more proactive, and working in partnership with a lot of people, what would you say, Yershen, are the immediate short-term challenges for you, not just to shake this image that you've been a wasteful institution, but an organization that's actually dedicated to empowering and uplifting young people?
Well, I always joke that the biggest challenge seems to be the media, not young people. But I think young people are very optimistic. I also think that many young people are also realistic. They know that we can't depend on the NYDA because it's just one institution.
Right.
And they're trying a lot of things. And I mean, I always say, if I didn't have a job, I'd also be angry and frustrated. And so I'm trying to encourage young people to say, let's channel that anger and frustration constructively towards creating opportunities for ourselves. And I think at the end of the day, we've then got to say, well, what kind of resources are we working within? And if there's financial constraints, how do we bring on the private sector to help us? How do we bring on the civil society? How do we bring on international partners to help us? If there's legislative constraints, how do we look at what is the mandate of the NYDA? What is there a way to refine that mandate to now enable it to do more for youth development? What's the role of youth directorates currently? And so I think we really need to look at coordinating our work better.
So it's in fact an ongoing conversation.
Indeed.
Yershen, thank you so much for making the time to come and speak to us here on Political Exchange. Well, that's where we will have to leave it. Tune in again tomorrow night for another edition of Political Exchange. I'm Karina Brown. Goodbye.